Hi everybody, Melissa Klein here, and just finishing the rose. And it's in all of its glory on the windowsill, and the light is just so gorgeous, and so warm. And I feel like in some ways I did two paintings here. So here what I'm doing is I'm just showing you that I used my iPad with the photo reference, that I was actually using that more so than the real rose sitting on the windowsill, because I was painting at night, and I wanted some consistency with light. Now here what I'm doing is I'm starting to get into the Pro White, and I'm using Pro White blended with the ink to get some of those things. And to be honest, you know, I would still use it. I still stand behind that choice, but in some ways, I think actually I was liking the white of the paper. So I did a very light, more just like places where I just wanted to define things a little bit more, um, and kind of stayed away from the right hand side of the rose where the light was really coming in through the window. Um, so there's that. And I think at this point I had to let my cat in or out. She's just been like that. I'm just a slave to her. All right. But there was a little bit of touch up, as you can see here, that was happening, but pretty minimal. And the thing that I'm really learning with this is like, continuing to refine the curves, trying to keep my head out of the camera. Sorry, guys. Trying to find those little shadows. And a lot of it is in what I would call that Goldilocks zone. Not too dark, not too light, and that it's very easy to get a little bit too dark. And that you have to use a lot of water, and you can see how much I'm using on that little ceramic plate. But one of the things too is when you start to darken one area, if you have the intention to darken other areas, like, it's kind of a judgment call, but sometimes it makes more sense to wait till you kind of work your way around it and then fine tune it. Right now, as I'm looking at this, in the upper right hand corner of the rose, there's this just really dark like pink stripe in there. I'm like, what? But for whatever reason, I was just deciding to work on this side of it more, and finding those shadows underneath, and finding those both hard and soft edges. And I think that is like kind of one of the main crux of doing the painting of rose, is that you have a real combination of hard and soft edges. They're starting to look a little bit better as I'm adding kind of a thin glaze coat of Pro White. And again, being very careful, like it's actually not very little of it's Pro White, pure Pro White. Most of it, the time I'm going for a mixture of things, except where you see even that, like, I was gonna see, because I just did some like major highlights, but I don't think it was pure Pro White. It was, at the very least, it was watered down. And blend. So I'm using a lot of pull techniques. I think I talked about that last class. Um, and just kind of looking at the structure of the petals, which of course have changed around. Here I'm just deciding I want to add a few more darks into the bottle. And I'm also kind of noticing that the background with the windowsill is a sort of a cool yellow overall, and the center of the rose is a warm yellow. I thought that was kind of going out a little bit on a limb to see how that contrast worked. That's kind of an unusual thing. Normally you would just kind of stick with one yellow tone on things. And you'll see kind of how I sort of adjust that. Another thing about these petals is, as they've been, moving and drying out and stuff, and plus I think I mentioned earlier that I was kind of like, oh, I wish I had kind of some of my lines got erased on my original drawing, which I felt pretty good about, you know. I felt like things kind of fell into place on that drawing, like where they should be when I went to paint it, and the pencil had somehow just smudged out or something. And you know, and there you can see that on that upper right hand corner, I've gotten rid of that pink stripe from hell. So, but there's still, I'm still seeing that there needs to be some softening of some of those edges on that right hand side, which I'm finally getting around to there. And I think there's this sort of magic moment when things start to just sort of pop and click, that you start to feel, they start to feel right as you're adjusting. Now here what I'm trying to do is, I decided there was a fair amount of white in that windowsill, or, you know, window pane. So I'm just doing a glaze coat of Pro White on it. And I'm kind of laughing at myself here because I'm using a brush that's a little bit too small, but I'm being really stubborn. And I'm like, you know, I think eventually I break down and use a bigger brush, which I don't know why. Yeah, there we go. Why I was doing that. You can see, like, it's so much easier. Like, whereas before, I mean, it's, well, at least to me, you can see all these little stripes going on. I still want to keep that upper plane. Now here what I'm doing is just deciding I'm going to just darken everything around here to make, because I felt like the background, even though I like the lightness of it, that, and I blatted out a little blot, even though I like the lightness of it, I felt like I could maybe still have that lightness or sense of lightness. I'm laughing as I say this because it's like getting really dark there. But I, you know, kind of the outdoors and the nature type feeling. And here, because I've darkened the window panes, notice that the little, I don't know, cross thing, like it's sticking out of the head of the rose. I'll go back and fix that. But that's a great example of, you know, there I am fixing it. Just, you know, just kind of slightly, and it didn't take much, just a little bit of a shadow onto it. Same thing on either side. Like, I still want that contrast of the top plane of the window frame to the side, I guess, and how it's catching the light. And then I'm going around and refining the edges of that, because I painted that really super loose, and I wanted it to be just so I could kind of, like, you know, knowing that I could probably go back into it. Now here what I'm doing is there's all these little tiny bubbles within the glass, and you know, I was kind of going slightly nuts trying to get all of them. And at a certain point I just decided to do what I would call the tree thing, where I, you know, you define a few of them, and then I'm deliberately kind of blotting it out. So, because I don't want them to be like, I want these bubbles to kind of be in the glass, kind of be a little bit faint. And I'm just kind of playing around. But at a certain point, I just decided, you know what? I think the easiest way and best way to get this effect that I want is to do it and then blot it. Do it and blot it. And then just going back in. I love doing these highlights. I feel like, you know, when you add the highlights, it looks so magical how it suddenly starts to feel like glass. But really it's all the hard work of the gradients and the other things, that elements that you laid in underneath that are really doing the work. The highlights take all the credit, but they're so fun to put in, as that, to me, they're kind of the reward for that. And here I'm doing my signature, and so that nobody can see it. Thank you so much for watching. It's been so much fun.